Hey everyone, and welcome back to a new video. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how I transformed my entire color grading workflow from using hundreds of layers in Photoshop to simply moving around a few sliders in Lightroom. The trick is to combine two simple techniques. The first is to stack precise adjustments, one on top of the other, using Lightroom's AI masking and refinement tools. The second is to apply multiple subject separation effects to specific areas in your photo, such as your subject and the background, resulting in a vibrant and 3D look that pops. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom, and as you can see, we have the fully edited photo here before the Photoshop adjustments were made. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and click reset here to bring us back to our original raw photo. So just a little bit of context for this photo. It was captured in a bedroom. This scene was a relatively low lighting scene. We have a little bit of light coming in from the window right over here, illuminating our subject from the side, and we have an incandescent bulb creating a little bit of light texture in the background, which I will also be using to create some color contrast in our edit, as you will see in the steps to follow. So before we get into the two simple yet powerful tricks to transform our image, let's go ahead and get started with a bit of a base edit, some basic adjustments here, starting off first and foremost with an increase to the exposure. So I'm going to bring this up quite significantly to 2.15. Next, I'm going to come on down to the highlights and shadows sliders here, and what I want to do is toggle these around so as to reveal more detail in our image. So basically what I want to do is reduce the highlights. So I'm going to move this down to -58, and then I'm going to go ahead and increase the shadows to +48. Next, I'm going to take a look at the whites and black sliders right over here, and I'm going to toggle these in order to introduce a little bit more contrast into our photo. So for the whites, actually, I'm pretty happy with how they're looking right now. I'm just going to reduce the blacks ever so slightly to -11. So the tones are looking okay for now. However, the image is missing a lot of color. So a trick I like to use to reveal the color in the image and really bring out the colors so that we can see what we're working with is to really pump up the vibrance and saturation sliders right over here as a starting point. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and refine the colors further once we have revealed some of the colors in frame. So that is what I have done here. To begin that refinement and fine-tuning process, I'm going to come up to the white balance slider right over here, and I'm going to go ahead and toggle the temperature. So I'm actually going to increase the temperature, warm it up a little bit to 4183, and then I'm going to also increase the tint to +8. Now don't worry about the saturation levels right now. The colors are looking a little bit unnatural, but we are going to come on down to the HSL and color tab right over here, and we are going to be fine-tuning the colors further. Let's go ahead and start off with the oranges and reds, particularly in the background and in the shadows in the model's skin here. I'm going to click into orange, and I'm going to move these away from the harsh red side, and I'm going to shift this to the right to about +15. So already that is making a huge difference. I'm also going to now increase the saturation to +4. I'm going to click into the reds now, and I'm going to shift the hue again away from the harsher left side, the harsh reds on the left side of the slider, and I'm going to shift this over to +8, just a bump slightly to the right. And I'm also going to decrease the saturation to -2. Alright, the warmer colors are looking pretty good right now. That's looking much better. So the next thing I'm going to do is target the blues, and I'm really going to bring out the blue tones that are in our foreground here in order to enhance that color contrast that we're going to be creating to make our image more dynamic and more vibrant. So I'm going to go ahead and shift the hue slider away from the teal side and towards the right side so as to make them more purple in hue. So as you can see, what we're doing here here is we are shifting our palette away from orange and teal towards more of a purple, yellow, complementary color palette. Okay, so I'm also going to pump up the saturation of the blues over to plus 16. And finally, I'm also going to increase the luminance to plus 34. So next, before we move on, I'm just going to come over to the purple saturation and give this a slight bump to plus 11. Okay, next what I'm going to do is come on down to the color grading tool here, and I'm going to apply a little bit of a slight adjustment to get rid of some of the harsher color casts that are currently present, particularly in the shadows on our subject. So we have a little bit of some harsher reds coming through, and I want to counter that slightly by pouring in some color that is opposite to red. So more of a greenish teal color that we're going to be pouring into the midtones and shadows. So to do that, I'm going to make sure that we have the midtones selected first and foremost, and I'm going to go ahead and drag this point to the opposite of the reds, and I'm going to fine tune this to a precise value of 149 and a saturation of 4. That's perfect. So I'm going to do something similar for the shadows now. I'm going to take this point and I'm going to move it also to the greenish / teal side of our color wheel, and I'm going to fine tune our hue to 160 and make sure that the saturation is 4. Okay guys, so with the base adjustments applied to our photo, now it's time to apply our 2 simple tricks in order to make our photo come to life, in order to make it pop and look much more 3D. And to do that, we are going to click into this tab right over here, which is the masking tool. In this masking tool, we are going to apply the 2 tricks. The first trick is something that I like to call mask stacking. Mask stacking is essentially using AI's selection tools to create multiple adjustments to different parts of our image. So what we're essentially doing with this first trick is we're emulating layers in Photoshop, except for we are now doing it inside Lightroom, and we are going to get much cleaner results using this method. Now the second trick is all about using subject separation. And subject separation is essentially an editing trick where you apply contrasts in color and light to different elements in frame in order to make parts of your image distinct and stand out from one another. So let's go ahead and begin with our first mask that we're going to create here. And to start, I'm going to begin by targeting the background. So to do that, all we need to do is click background, and Lightroom's AI selection tool will automatically make a selection of the background. Now, as you can see, Lightroom has incorporated a bit of the foreground into our background selection, which is not what we want. So we can go ahead and modify this selection by clicking into our mask right over here and then clicking subtract. I'm going to click into brush, and then I'm going to come on down to our foreground here. You can go ahead and adjust the size of the brush using the square bracket keys, and I'm going to remove a part of our selection from the foreground. And I'm also going to reduce the density so we feather our selection into the background like so. Okay, so once we have fine-tuned our selection, I'm going to simply just click into exposure and reduce this slightly. In doing so, we are taking advantage of the brightness subject separation. And what you can also do is go over to the amount slider right over here in order to fine-tune the effect you just applied. So I'm going to bring this down to about 68. Let's take a look at a before and after of that subtle effect. Okay, let's zoom back into our photo here. I'm going to click back into masks. Now it's time to create our next mask, and that is to now create a subject selection. Now in this case, I'm actually going to make an addition to our selection in order to incorporate more of the foreground into our selection. So to do that, I'm going to click into add. Once again, I'm going to click into brush. I am going to increase the density back to the original value, and then I'm simply going to paint into our foreground like so. Now from here, I'm going to apply 4 subject separation techniques. The first is to increase the exposure very, very slightly to 0.1 1, 2 in order to brighten our subject, make our subject stand out and more distinct from the background. I'm also going to decrease the blacks slightly, so I'm going to darken the blacks. In doing so, you're increasing the contrast in your subject ever so slightly, thus taking advantage of the contrast subject separation. Next, I'm going to cool off the temperature, so I'm going to cool off the subject and the foreground very slightly to -8. Now, in doing so, we have lost a little bit of color in our subject. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm also going to increase the saturation slightly to +2. So that looks pretty good to me. And in doing so, we are taking advantage of the saturation subject separation. All right, so while on the focus of the background, I'm going to now apply another mask, the third mask, which is going to be stacked on top of the second mask, and it is going to be a radial gradient. And the shortcut for that is Shift+M. Otherwise, you can click into create new mask and radial gradient. So what I'm going to do is click and drag, hold the button down in order to resize and reconfigure your radial gradient like so. And then you can go ahead and fine tune its position like so. And then you want to come over to invert. So this button here will invert our selection in order to create a vignetting selection. So with this, we are now going to darken the background a little bit further, particularly in the corners of our photo, and this will create a vignetting effect. So let's go ahead and reduce this down to -0.29, and then I'm going to also decrease the contrast slightly to -11, and I'm also going to reduce the whites to -16. All right, let's take a look at the effects that we have applied so far. Already you can see quite a strong difference. We are making the subject a little bit more prominent. We are making them stand out a bit more from the background and pop. And so the next mask, what we're going to do is enhance the warmer tones in the background in order to enhance our color contrast, subject separation, and also to make the colors in the background generally look a little bit more visually appealing. And to do that, we're going to be using a very special tool in the masking feature, which is to first and foremost, let's go ahead and select the background. Now what I'm going to do is click these 3 dots right over here, and I'm going to select intersect mask with brush. Now the intersect mask tool is such an incredibly powerful way to create next level targeted adjustments within the masking feature. Essentially what it enables you to do is create a mask within a mask. So let me go ahead and demonstrate that for you now by making a selection of the warmer tones specifically in our background. So I'm going to make sure that our flow and density is set to 100, and now we can go ahead and start painting in over the warmer tones in the background, and Lightroom will automatically exclude our selection from our subject. So we are creating a mask within the background mask. And now from here, I'm going to go ahead and come on down to the temperature right over here. And I'm going to go ahead and increase this to +17, reduce the tint to -12. I'm going to shift the hue to 2.4. I'm going to reduce the saturation a little bit to -15. And now I'm going to come on down to the curve tool right over here, and I'm going to click into the greens, and I'm going to actually increase the greens slightly to 138, 145, as well as increase the blue tones to 140, 146. So I'm happy with how that's looking. However, we do have a little bit of discoloration in the corners here. The color is looking a little bit green for my liking. So to improve that, what I'm going to do is click K, and now we are going to be stacking on our 5th mask in our masking stack right here. And I'm going to adjust the size of the brush like so and make a selection of the corners. And then what I'm going to do is come on over to the red curve, and I'm going to increase this to 124, 132. So that's looking much better to me. Okay, so the masking effects are coming together quite beautifully. What I'm going to do now is apply a bit more of a spotlighting effect specifically over our model's face. So first and foremost, I'm going to either hit K on the keyboard or select the brush masking selection tool right here. And now I'm going to reduce the density down to 70%, and I'm going to make a selection directly over the model's face. Like so. That's looking good to me. And now what I'm going to do is brighten up the face slightly to 0.15, increase the shadows to +19. It just helps to create a bit more of a spotlighting effect onto our model's face so that our attention is directly drawn to our model's face and her most important features. This also helps to bring the model's face forward a little bit, enhancing the illusion of depth and dimension in our image. From here, I will right-click the photo, select Edit In, and open as Smart Object in Photoshop to apply some skin retouching. And I will occasionally use AI generative fill for additional cleanup and photo enhancement. Now guys, what we've touched on today merely scratches the surface of the incredible possibilities when harnessing Lightroom and Photoshop to craft stunning portrait images. For a more in-depth exploration of my editing techniques, check out my portrait transformation masterclass linked in the description below, and I look forward to seeing you in next week's video.